Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Webinar. Today is March 27th, 2025 here, and March 28th down under where Brendon is. Brendon Reid is my special guest. He's worked on lots of different projects, as we all have, but one of them is called Archabytes, where he's sharing some very useful add-on library parts, utilities for ArchiCAD users. How are you doing, Brendon?
I'm doing good, thank you, Eric. Nice to be here. 7 a.m.
Right. It's 1 in the afternoon here in California. So all of you who are on the call, please type into the questions area. Let us know that you can hear us and see us and where you're calling in from. And that way we'll see how far we're connecting around the world. I'm waiting for there. Okay, Nicole from Berkeley, California, just around the corner from me, almost. Paul from Colorado. Salida, Colorado. Okay. All right. So, yeah, waiting for a few more to come in because I can see it's up to 23 people, etc. Okay, and Jean-Pierre from Melbourne. Do you know Jean-Pierre Biasol or Biasol?
I know that name. I need to put a face to that name. I do know the name.
Okay.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah. So, all right. So we shall get going. Right now, I'm just sharing the screen with the ArchiCAD user website, and it has Brendon's name on here. Let's, Brendon, let's bring up your site, and then I'll switch over to. Actually, I think I have a link on here. So
actually, I do have the site open on my screen, so
yeah,
I was going to go through the process.
Open link here. So this is Archabytes.tech, T-E-C-H, and it's bytes spelled like bytes of food as opposed to computer bytes. Although I'm sure you have a play on words here. I'll just take it a little bit bigger here. So an object library developed by practicing architect and BIM specialist. Okay, so library packages with all sorts of cool things. If you hover over them, you'll see a little animation showing some of the variations of what they can do. All right, so let me make you presenter, and then you can talk about your background. Let's, tell us how you got into ArchiCAD, and I know you've been actually helping train users for a long time and develop some of the Graphisoft online training materials. So let me go make you presenter here.
Sure.
Okay. So go ahead and share your screen. And for those viewers filing into the room, please say hello through the questions area and just tell us where you're calling in from. And we'll also use that for Q&A. So obviously when you're, as we go, just put in questions and I'll pass them along to Brendon.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so very briefly, my history, it goes back a long way. I've been in the industry for 35 years, and I started in New Zealand 1990 as a very young cadet in a small practice, where I started learning my craft. And I worked under some very good people who were very much of that, because it was all manually drafting back then. It was all on the drawing board, but it was about, at that time, the people I worked with were very fixed on every single line on a piece of page had to mean something, and it had to represent something in a meaningful way, right? So line thickness was important, and depth, and almost every piece of documentation was a work of art. That sounds a bit dramatic, but that was how I grew up, learning architecture. And then in about 1993, I think it might have been thereabouts, they decided to get AutoCAD. And AutoCAD was fine. They just introduced this thing called Paperspace. So you could do all your sort of modeling. There was a lot of line work, in fact, not a lot of modeling, but there was a lot of line work in this model space, and then you could create paper-space sort of views, like we do with ArchiCAD now in our views. But one thing that really I was quite interested in was this 3D sort of idea that you could build in this three-dimensional way. And we had a very large housing project that we're working on at the time. And I thought I'd take it upon myself to model the structure of it. And the team, the architects, were blown away by this ability to be able to see this stuff in 3D. And that's where I started getting this whole idea about the value of 3 dimensions, three-dimensional architecture. But that didn't really come to fruition until 1994, when I changed practices to a practice in Christchurch in New Zealand. And that practice was, I think, the second or third practice in New Zealand to get ArchiCAD. And that started developing workflows. And again, 3D was a big thing, but it was much more accessible. And so we were using it for stakeholder engagement and trying to sell projects and walk clients through projects. It was a little bit clumsy back then, but obviously it's changed a lot subsequently. So then I'm not going to bore you about the rest of my career, but I suppose ArchiCAD for me started in 1994. And I did have an affinity for technology, hence why I think I am where I am. I really love the ability to tinker inside ArchiCAD. You know, there's many ways of doing things. And I think if you're not sort of trying to program a GDL, maybe you should, because there's lots and lots of value in that for you, a lot of automation, a lot of reducing a risk. Probably a little bit, I haven't just done architecture either. I suppose that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, the fact that I have actually worked in architecture, but not just as a designer, not just as a technician, but I've also worked in as a BIM manager as well. And I've managed teams. So I've been across a broad cross-section of roles within architecture practices and lots of different sizes of practices as well. So I think about 12 or 15 years ago, I started working for a company called Rice Daubney in Sydney. And Rice Daubney was a larger practice, about 100 people, 120, 110 people at our largest. And we used ArchiCAD to deliver large hospital projects, not just hospitals, but they were our largest projects. And one in particular project that I worked on was a Australian dollars, $2 billion project. So that's about 1.4 billion US dollars. So it was quite a large hospital. And of course, that would have been 10 years ago. So that we probably doubled that price now. Very large project. And we had 40 people working concurrently in that project. And they say that ArchiCAD's not for large projects, you know, and I must say it was a successful project, a very successful project. We actually worked in collaboration with another architect who was in Brisbane. They did the facade of the project, and they were working in Revit, and we worked collaboratively together on that project. Not to say there weren't headaches in the beginning, getting IFC to work in a collaborative way, but we managed to make it work, and it was really, really successful. Unfortunately,
did you have a engineered HVAC structural, also creating BIM models?
Yep, absolutely. We didn't bring any HVAC models into our ArchiCAD model. We used Celebri for that, which is a collaboration rule checking tool. So, and I believe the other architect was using Navisworks, in fact, for what they were doing at their end. So it was pretty eye-opening, really, to get 40 people into a model working concurrently. We used a lot of modules, hotlink modules, that is. We did have multiple files specifically for our layout books. So we didn't have any outputs in those model files. Well, in the large model files, we didn't. They were all independent, separate layout books, and we used what they call plotmaker files. So we were publishing these plotmaker files, which are effectively views, but they're like little PDFs, and they were placed on the layouts in those other files. So they were really snappy. You could open up that layout book, and there were literally thousands of sheets. And you open up the view, and of course, because it was a static image, it was a snapshot of a point in time referring to an offline view, they were very fast to open. But of course, because it wasn't connected to the model, when you wanted to update your models, you had to publish those views or PMKs out again. But I think it was a really robust way to work.
So the trade-off was speed in terms of viewing, just accessing the stuff, but when you had significant changes, you had to go through a publishing process and an updating process. But overall, it seems like you managed to make it work, and that was the preferred trade-off, because obviously if you put everything within one file, it is in theory live all the time, but that means every time that you're referring to the sheets, you either are waiting for it to regenerate or telling it, do I need to regenerate these particular views, which of course can take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you've got lots of geometry, elevations and views take a long time to generate. And you know, our floor plan, I believe I think our ground floor was a couple of 100 meters long. There were 60 A1 sheets for a floor plan at 1:50. So it was a large project, very large project. Maybe it was 70. I can't recall now, but it was a lot of sheets per level. What else was interesting about that project? And so being a hospital, there's a lot of repetition. You know, there's operating theaters, and if you've got more than one, you might as well only model it once, and then place it multiple times, and which is what we did with these, what we call standard rooms. So, you know, may have had an observation room or, you know, a cleaner store or whatever it might have been. So we had a separate model specifically for those rooms, and that's where the documentation came from, those rooms. And then you would use modules, hot link modules, to module those FF&E or the furniture, fitting and equipment into that room. And that was also very successful, but it did require a lot of robust QA management, because again, when you've got multiple files and you're starting to share information between those files, then you get issues with things like attributes. So we had to be really secure in the way we controlled or managed, maintained all those attributes. And by attributes, I mean things like lines and surfaces and fills and you know, those kinds of things. So on the BIM server, we shut all the attribute creation down. So people could not create their own layers. They couldn't create anything like that. But we had a model manager who was responsible for all of that. So if you needed something changed or updated or created, you would go to him and he would create that in a robust, managed way. So both of those models had the same attributes at all, pretty much all the time. And I think the other thing about shutting those attributes down on a larger project is what it does do is it creates people to, it ensures people communicate. And that was something I think you can get, if you leave all those attributes open for a project team to manage themselves, people don't talk, they just make modifications. And that's when things can go wrong. So I think it was a really robust way of working, just to shut all of that down. It took a while for people to get used to, because people are used to being really agile and changing things as they go. But I think for us in that project, it worked really well. So yeah,
that was one specific project that took, I imagine, several years to complete, and that played a major role in terms of management, structure, quality checking, and all of that. Did you do additional projects with that company later that were similar?
All of our projects were like this. So I think, you know, if you cast your mind back 15 years ago, BIM wasn't a thing. BIM wasn't really around. But maybe even, I don't even know if it was a term that was used. But we delivered all our projects that way. That was the methodology behind how we delivered our projects, because it was of value to the business. You know, the business, we're efficient doing this. You know, we've got, you know, less risk doing this. This is why we're choosing to deliver our projects this way. And we had 3 people in the technology team for a practice of 100. So that's quite a lot. So, you know, we had a strategic person who was responsible for the overall strategic vision and drive in the business. We had a sort of a principal support person who was responsible for ensuring that everyone had what they needed and supported those teams. And then we also had a coder, someone who was, well, actually we all coded. We all learned how to use GDL, but he in particular was developing some very, very sophisticated objects. One in particular was a door. So we had our own door that did pretty much every single door. It was controlled by a model view option that controlled its visibility and characteristics and the way we wanted it to display things. But what we had was a PLN file, a local file, that you could use to create the door. But the minute that door was placed inside the teamwork file, it'll be locked to a type. So in your PLN file, you create as many types as you want to do, door type 1, door type 2, door type 3, with certain characteristics in it. Maybe you had instance-based characteristics and type-based characteristics. So maybe the type-based characteristic might be a door panel and the size of that panel, and whether it's a far-rated door, it might have a vision panel or something in it. So that'll be your type, but whether it had kick plates or not might be an instance. So then when you place that door type 1 in the project, you couldn't change any of those type-based characteristics. So you had a really robust way of having door types in your project. But maybe that door needed to have kick plates on it. So you would go into the settings and you'd kick plates or tick kick plates, and they'd be visible because obviously everything was in 3D. And then all your schedules you would run from the main file, and you would have those instance characteristics in those door schedules as well. The door schedules weren't the ArchiCAD, well, sorry, the outputs were a combination of ArchiCAD outputs, schedule outputs, and another mechanism used to sort of accumulate the data correctly and format it correctly. But for the most part, in fact, all of the information came from ArchiCAD, just the outputs weren't necessarily from ArchiCAD.
So when you're saying output, you're talking about the graphic output that one would see the schedule on a sheet, and that was being run through like Excel or something similar?
So we had all of the instance data, pretty much all of the data that came from the main model was a text file. So it wasn't actually a schedule, it was a list. So a lot of people have no idea about lists, and I will show you. And in fact, I'm sure you can see my screen at the moment, I think.
Yes.
So right down here on the right-hand side under your view, under the project map, there's lists. And if I just open that up, there are lots of different lists here for sort of elements and things. We had one specifically for doors that we created that gave us all the data that we needed for the doors. That was then exported, and then it was wrangled inside Excel. Exactly. There was a graphic one that came from ArchiCAD, but the actual element instance information all came from the list.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this is something that we all need to recognize, is that tools like ArchiCAD do a lot under one umbrella. However, there's no way that they can do everything that people want, you know, in that one umbrella. And so one of the strengths of ArchiCAD from long time ago is that it can communicate with lots of other tools, and so you can have the best of the tools for whatever purpose you need. And so that way, in this case, the critical thing was making sure that the data is consistent with the model. So you've got data in the schedule that matches what we're seeing on the plan, that matches what we're seeing in an elevation section, etc. And the way that it gets from the data within ArchiCAD to a visual on a sheet could be, and it very frequently is, direct. It's just place the elevation on the sheet or place the built-in schedule on the sheet. But when you want something fancier, then a workflow where you publish it out, do some stuff that's predictable, standard operating procedure, and then re-import it back in to be on a sheet. You know, that's certainly, I wouldn't call it even a compromise. I just say it's an effective workflow. So
yeah, no, I agree. And as long as it's documented and everyone knows how to use it, that's the thing. And I think that's what we found was most important, was that there was a process behind it, because if you didn't follow that due process, there could be errors. Obviously, right? And because it's not necessarily connected, it's connected, but there are risks, but it's about mitigating those where you can, right? So but it was really, really effective. And when you've got 8,000 doors, you know, how are you gonna manage 8,000 doors otherwise? You know, you're not going to do it manually. So, you know, and then, and I mean, having said that,
you have a, by the way, how long were you at that firm and what was the name of the firm?
the firm was called Rice Daubney, but they got acquired by HDR about 18 months after I joined. I think 2 years after I joined practice, we got acquired by HDR, and then of course HDR said you need to use Revit now. So I was involved in the transition from ArchiCAD to Revit, which that's a sad story. Unfortunately, it changed everything. Interesting to be involved in a very large organization. I mean, I think everyone in the US knows who HDR are. And at that time, I don't think they had a very strong digital team, but I don't think they had a really consistent method behind how to deliver projects using BIM. And they acquired an organization such as ours that had been, you know, delivering in BIM for 5 years. Not that we knew what it was called at that point in time, but they never really took any, or they didn't really take much of the you know, the processes or anything, because, you know, it's like, well, it's ArchiCAD, you're not doing anything significant, you know. So you should be using Revit because that's where the world is going, you know. So well, we had no choice. We were a very, very profitable architecture practice as well. So I can't comment on how profitable they are now, especially not in a recording such as this.
Yeah, sure.
But I know that we, you know, at the time using ArchiCAD, we were very good at what we did, and it was a very profitable business. And you know, I have very fond memories of that time.
Right.
Great time.
So obviously that's the type of project we can't take a look at, although maybe you can point us to if there are some images or photos online or something.
I wish. And we were not allowed to use any of that project for marketing or anything really. It was a PPP, a private-public partnership, and they were very, very not secretive, but they just didn't want us to share anything with anyone on that particular project. It's called the Sunshine Coast University Hospital, is what it's called. SCUH, I think. You may be able to find it. It's built now, obviously, and it was a really good project. I've been a high pressure project, but it was good project. But yeah, that was one of many projects that we worked on.
Do you have something to show us on screen? I saw, you know, behind your website you had a little.
Yeah, look, I'll show you
ArchiCAD file. Yeah.
Actually, just before I do that, I'll just so following my time at Rice Daubney or HDR, I then went and worked for Australia's largest contractor for a couple of years, called Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease, I think, here in the US. They're building some projects in the US. They built some projects in the UK as well. And that was again in Revit land. What was interesting with Lend-Lease is that we were a design practice within the construction company, and we delivered a lot of projects in an integrated way. So I had a team of modelers, so structural modeling, HVAC, and we all worked together collaboratively inside a single model. And that was a really interesting way of working. And I also started to see the value in data for a contractor. There's a lot of value for contractors, and they're the ones who are starting to drive things quite a lot, I see, across the industry. Then after that, I started working for myself for 5 years, just offer consulting services to ArchiCAD users across, well, predominantly in Australia, but also in the UK. And then more recently, about 6 months ago, I decided to leave that business behind because it wasn't really as fulfilling for me as what I was hoping it would be. And I now work for another company called MB, and we're a design. It's actually in data, digital advisory, should I say. So not necessarily in ArchiCAD land anymore, but what I'm doing as part of that is this Archabytes project that I'm working on with a mate of mine who's the coder. And I also have a ArchiCAD user group here in Australia and I'm actually working very, very closely with some sponsors at the moment. I used to be able to, because I had my own business before, I used to be able to bankroll having this user group, and I used to fly to Melbourne every second month, and we'd have an evening down there, and we would talk about all things ArchiCAD, a bit like what we're doing now, except maybe not quite as long. I do the same thing in Sydney. And then once I left my business, I was looking for a sponsor to support it. And I'm very close, I've been very close for a long time, but I'm getting much closer now. So those people who are in Australia, you can look forward to me coming back to Melbourne and doing my user groups back down there, hopefully in the next couple of months. I had a phone call this week about it, which is very exciting. So this is another little side project that I'm doing, and this is just more about what I've found in ArchiCAD. There's a lot of object libraries that are focused on 3D content, like doors and joinery or casework, and toilets and basins and taps and things. And for me, that's great. It's good to have those things, especially in the BIM world. Some are much better than others, so you need to be very careful where you get your content from. But I was, given my experience, and I suppose working with Graphisoft and developing a lot of Graphisoft Learn material, I realized that I had a real affinity with quality assurance and ensuring that when you created something, you were creating something with little risk where possible, or you could at least check and QA what you were doing. And that's why I sort of came up with this idea, actually, we need to create content for that kind of purpose. And that's what this is about. And at the moment, it's a handful of objects. Those objects are very complex. User interfaces is really good. The problem, obviously, when you get complex objects is that some user interfaces can get overly complex. We've tried to keep things as clean as possible, but obviously when you've got a lot of functionality, you need to be able to get access to it. Right, so we'll take you through those in a second. So at the moment, as I said, there's a handful of objects, and what's happening in the background, we're actually creating more objects. And so this library will grow, continue to grow over time. And that's the idea, is that this object library it's a single cost at the moment, but then in time, what's going to happen is you're just going to continue to get new and new content. And the price will go up marginally. It's not going to go up a significant amount, but that's the idea. So this is our website, as Eric alluded to. And if you want to, as I said, these are the objects. You can probably mouse over it. It can show you what they do. And these are the plans down here. If you want to, you can get a trial. These are Australian prices. By clicking download, now hopefully my mouse is going to work, yes. You can just click and come down here and choose the ArchiCAD version that you want to download. And just by clicking download, it'll download. You don't need to register, but certainly not today anyway. And you can then install it and then load it like you would any other library. So if I go into ArchiCAD, I'm inside ArchiCAD and I'm going into my libraries, and you'll see that I've loaded the library that I downloaded here, and it's just a loaded library. Now, this is a trial version of the content, and it works pretty much, every function works for pretty much as long as you want, but the file name must be called Archabytes at the end of the day. That's it. That's all we need to do. That's the only restriction. So if this file was named something else, the content would work, but it wouldn't be functional. You couldn't edit it, you couldn't change it. So what we'll do, let's have a quick look. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do that. I just need to bring my list of things I just wanted to talk about up. So at the core of all of these objects is our model view options. So if we go into the model view option and open up, so I've hidden these ones, and those of you who don't know ArchiCAD 28, you've got this ability to be able to hide all the other tabs, and so if I click that, you can see the tabs start coming back. So this is our Archibites. So you've got the ability to centralize the control of the text, the size of the text and whether it's sensitive, what the font style is, different dimension marks and cross what do you call them, arrows, heads, and that kind of thing. Among other things, we've got some other things we'll talk about a little bit later, but we want to be able to centralize the control of all our objects, because that offers incredible control over how you're working. You want all the text to be the right size, you want all the text to be the right color and the right font style. So that's how you do it with your model view options. So I wanted to show you that first. But every single object has the ability to be able to be unique. So it doesn't have to talk to the model view options, okay? You can have something that is specific just to that particular placed instance if you wanted to. So I'm going to use the first one, which is this door circulation. So I've just created a couple of favorites up here, and we'll just work through them. So I'll double click the favorite. And all I need to do is just place it on the door. So I click the door and it automatically places this label on the door. Now, this is to an Australian standard. So for the American viewers out there, this is probably not as useful, but if you have something similar and you would like us to include the American version of this, drop me a line, tell me where I can get the standards, and we'll plug it in. And we'll do this for every region. We have no problem doing that. Obviously, it's of value, then why wouldn't we do it? But you can see here, it builds a shaded area, which you've got full control over, the characteristics of it. And you can also display, well, I'm coming from these two directions. So if you're in a wheelchair and you need to get access to this door, and you're coming from this direction or that direction, the shape changes, right? And so of course you can dynamically change it. So it's just from one side to the other side, or that side, or I think you can do it, yes, either way as well. So it changes, so it dynamically changes. Now you may be thinking, oh, I've got 8,000 doors in my project. How am I going to place that? Am I going to click every single one? Well, there's a little trick in ArchiCAD, and I don't know if people are aware of this, but if you make this, if I option click, I'm on a Mac, so option click or alt click that label, and I delete it. If I select all doors, so if I go to the door tool and go Command A or Control A, and then you go up to Document, Annotation, Label Selected Elements, every single door will now be labeled across the project with that label that I had added to the active label. Not a lot of people know that, but it's quite a handy little tool. So you can see we've got these things crossing over. Now, at the moment, they're displaying, but if I go to the model view options, I can decide whether I want to display them or not. So if I go up to door circulation over here, I can then say, do I want to display the lines? Before I do that, this is the standard here. So we could have a US one here, a UK one, European, French, German, whatever it would be up here. We just need to add to it, and that's no problem. We can do that, as I said. We can say whether we want to show the lines with dimensions. You can see we've now got dimensions of each of those, right? You can decide to not display the lines at all, right? So there's lots of different ways we can configure how things are shown. There's a clearance here, a minimum clearance between the frames. Now, actually, what I should have mentioned was these doors are your standard ArchiCAD doors. So it works and it works automatically with any ArchiCAD doors. It also works automatically with the ArchiCAD doors, the ArchiCAD library doors, should I say. It also works with the CAD image doors as well. If you've got doors that are not those libraries, then you can manually place these on every door. It won't automatically configure itself. So I wanted to make sure that was pretty clear. What else can you do with this? What it doesn't do, and this is unfortunate, this is something that I'm working on at the moment. What I would love for Graphisoft to do is to be able to have 3D content. So when you place a label, the label is a three-dimensional label. So when you, if we go back to our display and display the our lines, I would love for that to be a three-dimensional volume. It's something that I'm finding here in Australia a lot, especially in the government space. If you're delivering a government project like a school or something like that, they require you to have a three-dimensional modeled space like this to ensure that there's no light fittings or any sort of physical, you can physically check the model checking capability to determine whether there's anything inside those spaces. So I think it's a good idea, but unfortunately we can't do that with a label. So I was looking at maybe seeing if I can get Python, a piece of Python code to do that, to look at the particular line and see if we can do that. But that's a work in progress. So it's something that we're very keen to try and resolve. Obviously, if you wanted to, you could create your own door and you could build this three-dimensional thing yourself and control it. But why do that when someone's sort of solved most of the problems for you?
Yeah, interesting. So let me just explain for those of you who didn't quite get that last reference. Obviously, labels are 2D annotation in ArchiCAD. We have 3D objects everywhere. The idea that you could place a label and use the convenience where you select all doors or just a bunch of them based on some criteria to place labels is very convenient, but not being able to also have some 3D volumetric elements is, let's say, a pity. Now, you mentioned Python code. So Python is a programming language which is widely used for a lot of different things, different contexts. But it's one thing that ArchiCAD has started to support. Basically manipulating information data, the model using this Python framework. And if you can think of it, it's sort of what is it really doing? It's like you had a person going through and checking each one of these things and building something from what's there, but of course automated and potentially updatable, etc. So yeah, if you can find that missing link or create that link in between the 2D and the 3D, then that would be cool. Yeah.
It would be very cool. And it's something that's actually interesting when we're talking about coding or talking about Python. I went to a conference in the US. It probably would have been about 10 or 12 years ago, and it was an Autodesk conference. And one of the presenters, it was 8 o'clock in the morning. I was pretty sleepy. This guy gave an incredible presentation, and it's a really had a lasting impact on me, in fact. And he said, if your practice doesn't have someone who's capable of coding, you're already being left behind. That was 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago. There is so much value. There's so much to be gained by automation using code. The great thing now is we have these tools called ChatGPT and this other AI that can start building code for us, which is awesome. I think, again, if you haven't explored what Python could do for you, connecting things, connecting data to ArchiCAD, connecting data in and out of ArchiCAD, and not just ArchiCAD, but also other platforms, you should be dabbling, because it's very, very powerful, very powerful. Okay, so that's kind of that tool. Like it does what it says on the box. You've got full functionality over all of the different characteristics there of the door. Okay, one of the other features of the door, which is pretty cool, and this is something that I think is missing inside ArchiCAD, and there's really no, as far as I'm aware, no way to test this, is the reveal side. Now, the reveal side of the door, when it's placed, is pretty important, because when you schedule that door in a graphical schedule, when you ask it to place an elevation of that door, or window for that matter, you can display the reveal side, you can display the reverse reveal side, you can display the opening direction. There's many different ways of displaying it. And obviously you want it to be consistent. And when you elevate that window, you want to be able to elevate it, or door, you want to elevate it correctly as the way it was meant to be elevated. And the importance of placing, which then requires you to place that door and window correctly. Otherwise, it can appear reversed in your schedule. Hopefully that was clear. That didn't sound particularly clear.
So
now,
let me just explain.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. When you place a door or window, you're hovering your cursor over the wall, and whether you actually go to the edge or you're in the center, there is going to be an indication with the sun icon, and that sun icon indicates what is that? That the reveal direction?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reveal side. Yeah.
Now, when you do that, that defines something that would then be accessible in terms of the schedule or other reporting there. Once you've placed it, or as you place it, of course, you can say swing to the left, swing to the right. You can also have it swing inside or outside. And so you might say, oh, that got placed the wrong way, and flip it or do a rotate. There are different ways to just say, hey, move this to open it a different way. But
I've got that wrong, so it needs to go like that.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. But that's not perfect because the reveal side is now over here.
Can you see the sun icon after you placed it? I don't think so.
No, there's no way to check. As far as I'm aware, there's no way to check where the reveal side is for that door. So what we've done inside this label is to check that. So if I go back to my model view options and I click on the disk, I can click on reveal side, right? And I can show it, and I can show the reveal side and hide the other labels, or if I do that. And now you can see the reveal side is the inside of this door, and the reveal side is on the outside of this door. So you can imagine, again, on a large project, what I've found is that it's easy to teach people that this is how you should place it. But then people forget, or they make a mistake, or someone else comes along, or something happens. And as I said, there's no real clear way to check, other than in your schedule, it's mirrored. So the same thing applies to Windows, right? Now, even though this is called the door circulation, you can place it on a window as well, and it will display the reveal side of a window as well. Now, there's a little issue with it in that when you turn the label, I'll go back to this and turn that back on, it comes up with this thing, attention, this circulation can only be placed on doors, right? But as a QA, if you select all windows and then just use that label the whole project, you'll be able to see very quickly if windows have got the correct reveal side. So that's, I think, a nice little QA check, to be honest. That was something that.
Okay, by the way, I just noticed that you had a message there about a coupon code. So let's just,
yes.
Yeah, so it showed up here. All right.
Sorry, I've been meaning to talk about that.
All right, so your pricing is quite reasonable for your collection of objects. Obviously, you've only shown a couple of things so far, and you have a lot of other ones. So 25% off. I mean, I basically asked Brendon, hey, people always enjoy having a discount. It'll give you, some little bump in sales just because people will go, well, I better do it now rather than doing it next year. So anyway, just use that coupon code when you're there. I don't get anything for it, so maybe I'll get a thank you from him, but so.
A big thank you, Eric, a big thank you. We appreciate it. So yeah, so that's it there, Bobrow 25. And hopefully if you don't get it now, you'll get it later. So that's pretty much that object. pretty functional. It's something that's been missing in ArchiCAD for, really, I think it's a really important thing. Okay, the next thing I wanted to do was the multi-label. So we've got a multi-label and it can pretty much label anything, okay? If I select it and move it across to the other side of the thing, notice how it changes its orientation, which is pretty handy. So you don't need to go and mirror it. You don't need to, to flip it or anything. You just need to select it and then move it to the other side, and it automatically knows which side of the wall it's on and it places it. So there's many, many different functions within that particular. If I go back to here, right back to the start. So we've got shape. So the shape of the actual thing can change to any of these types of shapes. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can test it yourself because you've obviously got access to the trial. So you can choose there. You can choose a different arrow or no arrows at all. The content itself, you can have many layers of content. So you can call out things like the ID field. You can call a property. You could call a building material. In fact, this one's displaying the building material at the moment, and you can display all of those things if you wanted to. Obviously, you've got full control over the colors and things. Again, the text can be centrally controlled from the model view options. The same for all of them. So I'm not going to bore you with all of those. This is where the
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite that shows something quite different than that? Just so we see, it's the same object. Just
I don't have a favorite set up for that. No, although I have one set up for an elevation. And I've got one for a door, which I'll show you.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going to add more information to this, and I was going to show you how you can do that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So you've got this thing called text source, and at the moment it's just looking at one text source. And at the moment, that text source is called building material. Okay, the building material is one of 5 building materials on that particular wall at the moment. So you can see that those are the building materials that you can call for that particular label at the moment. You can use the first skin or the last skin if you want to, but these are the skins that are available to you in that wall at the moment. But you may choose the ID field. And of course, now it's pulling the ID field out of that wall. You could also have a piece of custom text if you wanted to. You could call the composite name if you wanted to, and you can see the composite name is there. Well, it's probably not very big, but if I click OK, you can see that's the composite name. Now, people like to create all sorts of complex names. So what we thought was to make it as convenient as possible, I'll just move it across, is you could, if you wanted to, go into ArchiCAD, into the properties, create an expression. For those of you who, in fact, what I should do is go into expressions. Those of you who have played around with properties, these are properties. Properties are fields of data that you can attribute to an element. Only elements that are classified can, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but the element has to be classified for you to be able to get that information. And you can see we've got this thing called door type and window type. So doors, it's available to any element that is classified as a door. And we have an expression. And that expression says, I'm going to concatenate the custom text DT dot with an item type number. And the item type number is another field. And there's some data that can be associated with that. So I'm not going to get into details, but you can achieve quite a bit with expressions. You can create your own expressions that split information out of one field and place it into another field, and you can make things very, very complex. But it means you need to know how to write expressions. Instead of using expressions, you can use our label, and it does all that heavy lifting for you. You don't even have to think about what you need. You just need to be able to tell it what you want. So for this particular label, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the composite name, which I've got here, and I'm going to now split it the way I want to split it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to delete everything after the first space. or first whatever you want it to be, in fact, I'm going to make it a space. And now it's 100, right? Because that composite name, the first space, was after the 100. If I wanted to, I can make it the second space. I can make it a dash. I can make it whatever I wanted to. And if I do now the second space, it's going to be block. If I wanted to do that, I could actually create a piece of text before it. I could add to start. I could say, I'm going to add wall type to it if I wanted to. I mean, I'm not saying you should, but you could do that. And you can see now that I've added custom text to that. So this is not endless, but you can add an enormous amount of information to it. If you wanted to add a property to it, you could take a property. You could add a skin property. There's auto text. You name it, you can do it.
And you can have multiple lines of text, right?
Exactly. So I was going to say, if I choose this option, I can now have a second line of data underneath. So if I click that, I can now say, well, I actually want to have the ID underneath there. Again, the location of that text is also customizable under text appearance. At the moment, it's linked to the model view options, but I can make it custom, and I can make it to the left or right. I can go to the top one, and I can change all of that. So this is totally customizable, right? So you can have, and I had a client a number of years ago, and he said to me, when I label something, I want to be able to label the building material and the surface in one label, please. And at that time, I couldn't do that. But obviously now you can with this. You can label the surface, the outside surface, and the building material if you wanted to. You can label anything you want to. So you don't need to learn how to do expressions. You can just use this label. And the same label works in an elevation. So if we go to an elevation, and excuse how it appears, but if I went to the elevation and I double click that and I just click on the wall, you can see I've got red brick, and that's because it's taking the surface of that wall. So if I change the surface of that wall to stucco yellow, it'll change it to stucco yellow rough. Okay, it's a usual story. Right? It's pretty straightforward. Once again, you've got access to all of those fields here again. So there's no different to what we were just looking at before. It's exactly the same label. The same thing with the door. I've got a door one here somewhere too. Yes, this one. If I use the door, and if I just select on the door, reveal, that's interesting. How about that? That's because I've got this on still. Let's turn that off. That's an interesting one. Okay, so there's the door. Now this door has got, at the moment, it's taking the door type from a property, right? And these are your different properties that I've got here. So it's a property that I created which we saw before, and so the property manager. And the one underneath is the opening number, which is again another property.
Very elegant and straightforward to understand.
It is, and if you wanted to, you can have another field after it as well. So if I go to ID, you can now see that I've actually got the ID field to the side of that as well. So I can then, if I wanted to, I can add a start and add a dash. And so you can see now that I've got, the ID field next to the opening number. So, you can really expand this as long as you want. You can add another field to the right of that again if you wanted to. So we've tried to make it as elegant as possible. It's difficult when you're trying to get this much information and this much functionality into it, but we think it's reasonably straightforward and quite intuitive. And there's obviously lots of different ways of configuring it. You can have 3 layers of information configured any of these ways that you like. So look, we think it's very, very powerful, and it's I think we all would love to have access to this particular function. What I found with the ArchiCAD labels is that they sort of go 85% of the way, and they don't give you the look that you want, or they don't give you the data that you want. You've got to go to another one. This does everything. It solves all your problems, basically. I think it does, but I'm biased. Okay.
Well, one of the things is that you, having worked on large projects and managed large projects, you recognize the benefit of systems, of consistency, etc. For people who are doing it on small projects, it's just QA, just gotta put things in and make sure that the right data is there. But when you have it beyond a certain size, it becomes impractical to do it manually. So this is fantastic. But given your pricing and all of that, and just the straightforward nature of it, I'm sure a lot of people who don't have to have it could benefit from it and go, this makes my life easier. Yep.
Yeah, I think it definitely will save your time. Not only save your time, but it is going to just reduce your risk. Yeah, I mean, I still encounter people who just put 2D text where they should be using a label. It happens a lot, right? It happens a lot still. Another function that we have with this label is this ability to draw modules of block or brick in the building material. So it's like an additional function inside the label. So wherever a label is placed on a wall like this, it can display these modules. And we do that by clicking here and go to this wall block brick, and we can show panels. Now at the moment, I've got 2 that I'm displaying, so I can display up to 3 in any composite. So what it's looking at there is if I go here and I'll add another one. So if I click unused, I can apply to building material. I can click that and I can choose the building material that I want to display, the dimensions of those modules, the color of the line and so on, and whether it shows these hot lines, which I'll show you in a second. And then I click OK, and now you can see. So this wall, if I select the wall and go up into options, building materials, for those of you who don't know this, by clicking on that little arrow at the top there, it then groups all of the building materials of that selected wall up the top here, and they're green, you can see. So I can see now what building materials I have in that wall, and you see we've got a brick and we've got concrete block. Okay, so EF04 and ST05. If we go into our building, if we go back into here, you can see that it's EF04 and the concrete one, which is ST05. So if I go back to that brickwork one and I change this dimension to maybe 500, so we're in this particular project, we've got a brick, which is, now obviously I'm talking about metric. Obviously in Imperial, you have inches here, so I'm just using it for my usability, but for everyone in the US, of course, this is totally, it works exactly the same, just your units is different. But I'm going to say it's a 500mm brick, and I'm going to say that there's a 5mm sort of mortar gap between it. I'm going to use that orange color. The brick, the block work, I'm going to say that it's maybe it's a 300 and it's a 20mm gap between. And we're going to show red. I'm going to click OK, and you can now see that these have changed. The positions have changed. Beautiful. And you can see also that they're hot lines. So when you hover your mouse over it, you can see that they can be snapped too. So if you wanted to,
can you change where they start? Like the origin point.
You can. What I did notice when I was doing this yesterday, when I did move this, so you can move it around to where you want to start. Oh, it does work. It is working. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so you can see that it can be positioned wherever you want it to be. Okay, and then obviously it makes placing really easy. So now you know that you've got a door which is 2 brick dimensions or block dimensions or whatever it might be. So it's pretty
Wait a
handy.
second. Okay, this is interesting. So you're coordinating it around the door opening, and you were moving things, or you're just verifying that the door fits into a natural division?
Correct. Yeah. So what I might do is I might turn this off so that it doesn't, so it's a little clearer. So yeah, so we've got these so-called brick modules, and you know, a builder doesn't want to cut the bricks because it's an expensive exercise cutting the bricks. And so typically you'd want to have an opening that is within the brick modules. And this allows you to be able to accurately position your door to the brick dimensions or block dimensions within that wall. And a window, the same thing. So obviously if I wanted to put a window in that wall, I could do the same thing. I could just say, right, I want to have the window between, oops. See, that was a bit weird, it was a bit slow. But yeah, if I wanted the window to be in between this and this, I could do that and it snaps to it. So at least then you know that you've got exact block dimensions or brick dimensions.
Awesome.
And it's easily controlled by just switching it off and on. So you can have up to 3 modules in here displayed. That's what I was looking at, showing you here. So if we go back into that brick and block panel, you can have, you know, 1, 2, or 3 displayed in any dimensions here. And obviously it's just say don't display and it turns itself off. And that works because I've got a label placed on that wall. Now, just a word of warning, if I have a second label placed on that wall, it will display those lines twice. So just be mindful of that.
So is there a workaround for that?
Well, it's a bit of a pain.
You have to just explode the second label?
See if it, yeah, you need to move it over top of the other one. That's all. It's yeah, there's not much we can do about it, unfortunately. I mean, it depends how you want to use the labels. Maybe you want to have all the information on one label. You know, maybe you only need one label. But just a word of warning that this displays twice. It just means that you've just got to, I just need to remember to put it on top of the other one. And it's fine.
I see.
I just wanted to at least show you that that's a limitation. Okay, I'm conscious of time because I do actually have to go. I've got a work day ahead of me. But we do have a couple of other things. I think there's something that's...
While you go there, I'm just going to check. Does anyone have any questions for Brendon or comments? What do you think? Jean-Pierre, your colleague Australian, says, thank you kindly for today, and thank you kindly, Brendon, for taking us through. Very comprehensive. He has to run to take his kid to school. Will this be available to watch later on? Yes, I will post it on my YouTube channel and on the ArchiCAD user website. And he said, would love to connect and learn more. Thanks again and great work. Okay, Marquez, who actually one of my longtime clients who does work on hospitals. So he's based, I think he's in California, because at that point when I first met him, I was the reseller in the Los Angeles area, and I think he's based down there. So excellent approach, very elegant solutions. So
that's very nice feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. So Hermes is ciao from Verona, Italy. Okay, got that. And yeah. So so Vinicio says thank you, Brendon and Eric. So I will stay on. So I know you need to go shortly.
I'll show you.
Wanted to squeeze in here. So go ahead and do that. And anyone who has a question for Brendon, well, just post it right away before he gets off.
Okay, so another one is this wall type label. And I can just double click it and I can just click the wall and you can get that information out of the wall. So obviously the scale is 1 to 50, but if I make the scale 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 or whatever scale you choose, you can now just do a one click. I'm now going to get all the building material information into a single label. And that label can display whatever you want again. So if you want to get the thickness of the building material, if you wanted to, so let's have a building material. I'm going to get the width, and then I'm going to get the building material name. Right, there it is. I think it's meters. That's a bit interesting. That's probably because, oh yeah, okay. So why is that? Why have we got meters? It's probably because it's sitting here somewhere. Oh, it's embarrassing when you can't find something quickly, isn't it? Maybe. It's customizable anyway. You can change it to millimeters or feet and inches and whatever you like. I'd say it's probably interesting. Anyway, I can't, I'm under pressure, I can't think right now, but you can display all that information here if you want to, right? And it works for horizontal and vertical walls. For those of you who don't know, did you know that you can change the ends of walls so that they don't display? And that is controlled. Oh, no, Eric, help me out.
What are you trying to?
I'm trying to turn the end lines of the walls off.
Oh, that's on the floor plans and section. Scroll down.
Yes, there it is.
All end
Thank
lines.
you. So again, a little known function of ArchiCAD is you can actually turn the wall end lines off. So you can, so I don't know that people, like their, you can have a break line and that kind of thing, but you can actually turn that off if you want to do. Of course, the other thing you can do is you can add the any sort of property information. You can add the wall type, number. You can all sorts of things for this too. So anyway, I like this one because who likes to do this manually?
And you're as you're moving it around, it's always locking into the center of each skin.
Yes, correct.
Even though the notation is closer or further, but the end lines are always locked into that. That's pull it far away, just much further away. Yeah, beautiful.
And of course, if you did this, it does that. So you can control, and of course you can control where they are too, if you wanted to. So if you would rather have them horizontal, you can.
Awesome.
So and of course they're customizable. What the arrowheads look like, they're all customizable as well. So that was one thing, and the other thing was the section marker. I wanted to quickly show the section marker, because in the section marker, if I double click that, and we'll just sort of put a section through here. And if we open up that section, we've got the ability to control what these look like too. Okay, so these are your levels. Story levels. So again, similar concept as what we've seen before. We've tried to keep this as consistent as possible, but you can get the story information that you want to. You can get your reference level information if you want to. You can add some custom text to it as you want to. You can change, there's information at the top and at the bottom. So if I open up the preview, so at the moment we've got the story name up the top here. We've got RL, which is a piece of text, and we've got a reference level to meters there. And of course, you've got different ways of displaying feet, inches, millimeters, whatever you want it to be there as well. So, and of course, that little circle there can be whatever you want it to be as well. Well, within the
So this is using the
application.
story levels functionality that, of course, is built into ArchiCAD for many years. And Graphisoft supplies some basic story level annotation. This just makes much more flexible in terms of displaying things. You don't have to add text manually in there. It's all, of course, linked. And then once you have that set up as a setting that's within the section marker, that can be a favorite. So all your sections can look this way.
Yes, correct. And it's consistent. So for those of you who don't know, who haven't worked with reference levels before, under location settings, you've got this altitude. So you can actually say that ArchiCAD 0 is 45.35 feet above sea level, or meters above sea level, whatever you choose it to be. So I'm going to say this is 15.85 meters above sea level, and if I click OK, you can see it's 15.85, and of course it considers the next story as being however many meters above that level, and it automatically does that. So that's your reference levels. Obviously, you don't need to use reference levels if you don't want to use reference levels. You can just use your ArchiCAD level. So if we go back to our source, we can say, well, I don't want it to be, I just want it to be project 0. And of course now it's 0, right? Because it's the project 0, not the reference level. And for those who can't remember, under project references, location settings, that's where your reference level is, sea level. So that's a nice little feature. I think this is something that's been a long time coming, and I think people just use the ArchiCAD one because they've got no choice. But now you've got a choice to get the information that you want to. And I've seen it before. People just use text in here. So it's not absolutely necessary. You can do it like this now. That's kind of it, really. There's, all sorts of other functions and features within the tools, but unfortunately, I have run out of time.
Okay. So show the link or go back to the plan where you have the code, and then put the link in right there on screen so we can have that. So in other words, archabytes.tech.
Yes, it's where are we here?
So archabytes.tech, and then just click on. Now, do you download first and then buy, or can you buy if you say, hey, this looks great, I just want to buy it?
If you want to buy it, you just go buy, and then in your cart and at checkout, you can put this into the coupon code and it'll apply the discount.
Right. Okay. So I do see some more thank yous from Sophia saying thank you for a great presentation. Benicio, thank you, Brendon and Eric. Okay, so I guess we'll let you go, and I will.
Thank you very much.
Continue to
Sorry.
be here for at least a little while longer in case there are some questions that I can help people with. So Brendon, thank you so much, and yeah, I'll post this, and we'll stay in touch.
Great, thank you very much. How do I leave?
Well, let's see. So if you just quit out of GoToMeeting, you'll disappear from the screen, and then I can share my screen, of course.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. So all right, as I said, I'm going to, let's see, make me a presenter. Show my screen. Okay, so am I showing the what do you call it, the Slack workspace here? Maybe you can let me know. I think I should be showing what screen. Can't quite tell. Show main screen. Yeah, I guess main screen. Yeah, okay, that's good. All right, so I did see one question for me from earlier from Kevin Cabral. I don't know if Kevin's still on the call. Let me just see if he is. Yep, you are. Question was, is master template version 28 going to be released? The answer is yes. I did put in about, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 hours over her last weekend to take it further. I'm going to aim to have something by the end of this coming weekend that can be released. And let me just explain something briefly. I've said this in previous presentations. So Graphisoft has made it possible to update from one version of ArchiCAD to another for projects. Of course, that's just built in. They don't want you to have to stay in one version when there's a new, better version of ArchiCAD available. The method was pretty similar all through the years. You say open it up that project that was in ArchiCAD 26 and ArchiCAD 27, and then you had the option of either maintaining the old library or migrating automatically to the new library. And when you migrated automatically to the new library, things like the doors that might say D1, if you had a single door, D126 would all of a sudden become D127 and look exactly the same. In 28, they changed it so that because they are revamping the entire library structure for more long-term stability, so there aren't updates every year for that, they've made that transition manual. So what that means is that if you said, I want to open up my project in 28, it'll use the older library automatically. And if you want to use the new library, you can load it, but you have to then manually go and select each element or groups of elements, like all the interior doors that are the same size, and switch them to the new library. Okay, it's up to you. If you have a project that you're working on and it's going to be in development for a long time, you might want to do that. But if it's just in process and you're going to finish in the next 6 months or whatever, then you might as well leave it in the old library. No big benefit for you when you're switching from one version of ArchiCAD to 28 to switch the library parts. But a template, which, master template is an example. When you buy it, if you're a new ArchiCAD 28 user, you want to have it only load the ArchiCAD 28 library, not need to load anything from previous libraries. Okay, so I went through the template, which has a whole lot of saved favorites in a kit of parts that I call the interactive legends, and I switched everything over for the most part to the 28 parts. However, some of them are very complicated. If you think about stairs and railings, they have many, many parts to them, not just 3D parts like what do the posts look like or the balusters or the railings, but also the 2D parts such as what is the, what do you call it, the grid of the lines that show the what do you call it, the structure of the stair, or the directional arrows that show which way is up, or all of those sort of things. So there's lots of little parts for every single stair and railing, and each one of them has to either be switched carefully, methodically from 27 to 28 for me in my kit of parts, my favorites, or I have to rebuild, probably 40 or 50 railings and maybe 20 or more stair types to use the native 28 versions. So I started rebuilding those, and it takes time to do it right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get as much done as I can this weekend, and then create a version of the 28 template that I can distribute that may not have all of the stairs and railings that I'd like to include, but everything will be clean. And then as I finish the conversion, I can distribute just a little supplemental file that you can just bring in and drop in. So I think that's the best solution rather than waiting for, what is a lot of hours still of work to be done. So that's hopefully was understandable. All right, so I'm open to other questions. those of you who are in my ArchiCAD coaching program, you of course can use Slack here. If you're, and I will be meeting or having my ArchiCAD coaching call at the top of the next hour, 3 o'clock Pacific. But I am open if you have a question about just ArchiCAD stuff. So we could just call it and say, hey, that was a great presentation from Brendon. But if you want to get my insights or my feedback on anything, please just put it into Slack or put it into the questions. So far I'm not seeing anything. So I'll give the classic, asking once, asking twice, asking 3 times. Just let me know. And otherwise we can finish up in a couple of, in a minute or two. So, all right, I see Paul thanks me. So, all right, we still have 33 people on the line. So going once, anybody have a question that you'd like me to address during today's call? All right, so Stephen Uliak, I've had some issues lately with the translator settings for DWG export to AutoCAD. Any tips? Well, let's open up your line and let's just get a little more detail on this. So I'm going to open up your microphone. If you have a microphone, just click on the icon there. And then what version of ArchiCAD are you in, Stephen? So you'll need to find the GoToWebinar control panel and click on your microphone to activate it. So I've opened up your line, so you're not muted. You should be able to do that. In the meantime, if you just want to type in, tell me what version are you in so that I can bring up that version of ArchiCAD. And by the way, here is the archabytes.tech, and here are some previews of those parts that we were looking at there, little animations. All right, so you said that had issues lately. So I'm going to guess that, see, this is here. Okay, so I'm going to guess that it might be in, oh, you're in ArchiCAD 27. Okay, so if you do have a microphone, it would be great to do it. Let me just open up 27. By the way, this is a view of some of the railings that are in the template, just a small group of them, some ADA ones with extra handrails and different ones with glass panels and things like that. So I'm building those up again, making sure that they're nice and clean. All right, so you're in ArchiCAD 27 and you're sending the DWGs out as using DWG for Dummies, no changes to the base translators. Okay, so thank you for that information. Microphone is not connecting. Okay, that's too bad. All right, so then tell me, what are the issues you've been having? In other words, what, like, you're just telling me what you've been doing, but not what the problem is. Meanwhile, I'll look and say, all right, I'm in ArchiCAD 27. I'll just go back to the floor plan. Actually, if I go to just the project area as opposed to the kit of parts. All right, so when we're saving out from ArchiCAD for AutoCAD use, we can save out a plan, a section, an elevation, or we can save out a layout sheet or a set of layout sheets. So when we go here to the File menu, and I do Save As, you'll say, well, what am I doing? Am I saving this project with a new name or in a new location on a server or something like that? Or am I saving it in another format? And of course, we have DWG as an option. So when we're doing that, there are translators. So for those of you who have not used it much, what is a translator? It's a group of settings that are referred to when you translate from ArchiCAD, in this case to AutoCAD. And I'm not even sure if they use the word translator for anything other than AutoCAD translation here, but that's the general idea. So we have a number of different ones available. There's DWG for Dummies, which would be, let's say, simple, basic, gets the job done for many, common uses. There's ones that are more specific, like for further editing. So what is that? Well, from what it sounds like, for further editing means that you are sending it over. They're not just going to print it as is, they're going to work on it. Okay. And then there's for as is output, which, as the name implies, it's intended to be sent so that someone can just open it, print it, or open it and look at it. Keep pen index number has some other settings. You're drawing in ArchiCAD with different colors on screen. That's using pens. And one of the things is that if you're saving something as a DWG, do you want to maintain the pen numbers when it goes across, or do you want to have it translate pen numbers? And so ArchiCAD's set of pens is different than the typical AutoCAD set of pens, unless you set up in your ArchiCAD file with the idea that this is going to go back and forth with AutoCAD people, and I want red to remain red and green to remain green here. And then there's some options, specialized ones, layer by color. So you can say, hey, if it was on the object layer or the furniture layer, it should be this color. If it's on the structural layer, it should be that color. So there are some different settings. Now, if I go to DWG for Dummies and I go to settings here, it says it's simple 2D DWG, in and out, all elements are exploded, but library parts as blocks. So what does that mean? It means when you have a wall, instead of it going out as a wall, it's going to be lines, possibly some fills, and each line is going to be independent. So it'll snap, they'll be able to see things, but if they wanted to do something in it, it would require some work to select a bunch of related elements that you think of as a wall, but now are a bunch of lines. Okay. No layer conversions for import or export will be brought in as is, but with renovation status indicated in the layer name. So this is a text description for us to read. If I go down here, you'll see that there are some options here that are set based on the translator. So if I change it to for further editing, you can see a slight change. I'll go back and forth and you'll see some changes. So DWG for Dummies is set up with a certain use case, and it's fine for certain uses. When you're more sophisticated and you say, oh, but I don't want X, then you should either manually change this or you should use a different setting to get the effect that you want. So let's see if Stephen has written some things. Issues are that AutoCAD shows sinks in every cabinet item, random X fills in section, and a problem with the line colors in the output. I've never made any changes to the translator output, and this is the first time the problem has occurred. Okay, AutoCAD shows sinks in every cabinet item. Now, I don't know if that means, hey, there really isn't a sink in these cabinets, or you normally export it with having the sinks turned off, even though there are sinks. I don't know, you can be, perhaps you can clarify that. Now, random X fills in sections. So let's look at attributes here, fills and methods. Okay, so there are some choices as to export all fills as is or all fills as solid, and there are some different things here, and there's some options there. And there's also the idea that you can take ArchiCAD fills of a certain name and tell it to use a particular hatch pattern, which is, a hatch gives a similar visual effect to what ArchiCAD calls a fill. And so you can sometimes, or sometimes you may want to control, when I have a brick fill, I want it to be this, BRK fill, a hatch or something like that. I haven't done detailed translation stuff in a long time, but you can control that. So it says, he said random X fills in sections. So I don't know, is that XX, XX, XXX, or is it just there's an X somewhere? You know, I don't know what that means. And a problem with the line colors in the output. So if we're talking about lines, then that, and colors, and we're talking about pens and colors, and the settings in the DWG relate to, you know, are you matching this? So if you have a red line in ArchiCAD that's pen 10 and red in AutoCAD is pen 5, it may make it pen 5 so that it looks red. Or you can use an RGB color, or you can say don't, you know, best matching standard AutoCAD color, pen color conversion. You can also do something saying, hey, this pen number in ArchiCAD should go to that pen number in AutoCAD. I don't know that there's something, set all elements color and line weights by layer. Anyway, there are different things here. So bottom line is these are where you have some control over the settings. Now, big troubleshooting tip for this, you say, I've never had this problem before. So is this, you're in 27. Was the last time that you did an export in 26? And is there a problem now in 27? Okay, that's one thing. On the other hand, hey, it worked last week. Now it's not working this week. Okay, that's interesting. How would we troubleshoot that? Well, one thing I would consider is going to another computer if you have access to it. If there's more than one ArchiCAD station in your office, try saving it from that one. Maybe the settings are different there. So you want to compare. How does it compare to a previous version of ArchiCAD? How does it compare to another machine? What happens if you change, you know, some of these settings? Is it like, oh, that made it different? So troubleshooting for me often goes back to something's wrong. How can I get a comparison to when it used to work, or, you know, when something worked? And then of course, if you can say this is what I want, and over here it's not working, what's the difference in the settings? Is it a bug in terms of, well, you updated ArchiCAD 27 and now things are translating differently? I don't know. So there are, I'd have to perhaps see the file and see the results in AutoCAD. Now, I don't have AutoCAD. One tip that you can use if you are sending something from your ArchiCAD file for an AutoCAD user is, of course, if somebody has a computer, you have an AutoCAD in your office, you can look at that. If your client or consultant comes in, you can sort of compare. You can have a Zoom meeting where you're sending something and then they open it up a minute later and you see on screen, oh, let me see what's going on here. You can use that. Now there is also, at least there had been and probably still around, Autodesk had a free viewer for AutoCAD files. And so if you did a Google search for, you know, AutoCAD viewer or something like that, then you may find that, oh, you can install even on a Mac where you can't run AutoCAD native, but you can run a translator. Or there may be something that they have through a web browser. Hey, just bring in your AutoCAD DWG, which is what you exported, and then I'll show you what it looks like and you can maybe print it. So that will potentially allow you to iterate, meaning, let me change this setting, see whether it works better. So that's some general tips for troubleshooting. All right, so Stephen says, yes, it is just boxes with an X that do not seem to connect to anything. Okay, so don't know what that would relate to. If we talk about, so you're talking about random X fills in section. Okay, boxes with an X that do not seem to connect to anything. Okay, I don't know. Now, if we look at options fills, Okay, so any fill, let's just say it's a fill that has a pattern like fire brick here. If I zoom in on this, okay, that's got some lines, going in one direction, going in another direction, and then there's a preview here. Let's go to running bond. Okay, and this is, certainly a more precise thing. If I zoom in on it, we can see the precise lines, and we can say what is the size of the unit. This particular unit here is 2 2/3 inches. It looks like is the yellow there. Now we used to have. Just trying to think. Now this is what you see in when you're picking this out of a list. Like, this is what this little image is based on, is these dots. And there's some rare cases where you might show that on screen rather than this. But yeah, there used to be some vectorial things. Yeah, I can't think of how it would apply in this case. Boxes with an X that do not seem to connect to anything. So if you were to send me the file, then I could open it up and see. But you're saying that it's in section. It's not in your view of the section. When you save it out as a section for AutoCAD and it's opened up in AutoCAD, there are these X's. So we'd have to have, the AutoCAD viewer and be able to say, well, what is it? Now, there are ways in to turn off fills. So that's something that I remember we used to do all the time. We'd say, you know what, a fill in ArchiCAD is so efficient. You can have them all over the place. They do give graphic clarity. But when you export to AutoCAD, they get a whole bunch of little tiny lines, and it makes the file hard to work with because there's a lot of lines that have snap points, etc. And maybe it even slowed down the files sometimes. So we would, in general, recommend, hey, use an option to turn off the fills before you save the AutoCAD file. So if you wanted to test whether that maybe you don't need the fills there, then what you would do is you would use a graphic override. So right now I'm in construction documents. This just overrides zone fills, but I have something here. Let's see. What would be one with where it's turning off fills, detailing no fill. Okay, so this is one that I think comes from Graphisoft as opposed to the ones in Master Template specifically. And it says, hey, when you have a cut fill, you're cutting through a wall or a floor or a column or a roof. We're going to override that with an empty fill with skin separators. What does that mean? It's saying if it's all types and we're talking about cut fills, we're going to fill it with just a background fill. So that's just going to be pure white. But we're going to leave the skin separators saying, where the brick stops and the stud goes to, and the divisions between the skins. Now we can also hide the skin separators if you wanted just a very simple volumetric, 2 lines defining the thickness. Anyway, this setting here, if I were to have this turned on, and in fact, let me just, with this selected, say, all right, you see how these fills are. If I say okay, you can see how the fills disappeared. So now we're seeing the lines, but no fills. So sometimes that can be useful to just say, all right, let me turn off the fills and export this AutoCAD file. So, all right. So, okay. So Manuel asked for how to join the Slack workspace. So that is here, and maybe you're still on for a minute. You go to bobrow.com. So my last name is Bobrow, bobrow.com/Slack, and then put in your email address, and it will send you an invitation link, and you can join my ArchiCAD training.slack.com, and this is where you can type in messages to me, typically during one of the online sessions. It can simplify things, and of course you can upload images here. This was a question from last week that Tom was having an issue with some of the cleanup not working the way it was needed. Yeah, you can see the issue with the cleanup being messed up here, and here's what it was in 3D. And I guess this was okay in 3D, but there were complex profiles that were going on that he sent me the screenshot. All right, so that will help you if you want to connect up with me. So any other questions that I can help you with before we finish up today? All right, going once, going twice. All right, 3 times, and I'll call it. So thanks for joining me for the ArchiCAD user webinar. Be back in a few weeks. Don't know what April will bring, but I'm always open to having ArchiCAD users share projects. Maybe I'll do a project review where we actually have a few people bring projects in and we can take a look at them and talk about what's good, what's interesting, what they've done that's maybe a little unusual or special, as well as potentially anything that I can say, oh, you're not taking advantage of something in ArchiCAD. So it's been my pleasure to present this to you today. And I want to thank again Brendon Reid for sharing his experience as a BIM manager, as well as his tools called Archabytes, and you can get access to them for playing around at archabytes.tech. I will send out an email to remind people that you can not only get access to try them for free, but you can buy them for a discount if you use it. I think he had it Bobrow 25, and it was all capital letters. I'm not sure if that was critical. All right, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining me.